Hello, everyone. I will do an intro for Vi, hopefully, if not later, but we're going to jump into this right away. And I like messing up the beginning, so Phipps can be annoyed when he's editing. So, everybody, today we have Vi Burlew on the Easton Training Center Community Podcast or Team Podcast. I'm not sure of the name these days. But Vi has been with us since, Vi, I think, started the same year or the year after I started, 2008, maybe 2007. She can correct me here in a minute. She is currently the Academy Operations Director at Easton Boulder. That is what we call basically an assistant general manager. She was a kids teacher for a very long time prior to that. She is a major leader in our community. She spoke at our department head offsite at Topgolf this past week. One thing about Vi that we constantly talk about behind the scenes, like Ian, myself, and Alex, and obviously everyone else, is that Vi has an ability to she can explain pretty much anything to anyone, and they can understand. She has a way of simplifying complex topics, and for me that's like a sign of genius. So I really appreciate that about Vi, amongst a slew of other things, but that in particular really. I'm always like, oh man, let's have Vi do it, which can be challenging because then you start putting more and more work on that person. But we do appreciate that about her, and her capacity seems to be endless. So Vi, welcome today. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. I'm super excited. It's very kind of you to say, but yeah, I'm stoked to be here.
Oh, good. I'm glad. So, man, I'm gonna jump right in. What brought you to Easton, and why don't you tell a quick story of that journey from then until now? I know we heard it at the DH offsite, so I'm excited to hear it again. But please jump in.
Sure. So I was the second person in my family to start at Easton. We started in 2007. And my brother, Flynn, who is also our department head for jiu-jitsu now in Boulder, started first February of that year. I believe he was either 3.5 or 4. And I started in September of that same year, 2007. So about 6 months later. And we came to Easton for Flynn. But I remember sitting in the old Boulder school and, watching like movies on my iPod and things, and eventually being like, hey, it's kind of boring to sit here. I would like to start training. I want to do this. And when I first got into it as a kid, I actually became pretty resistant to training. I think at that age in particular, I wasn't really
How old were you? How old were
I
you?
was 8 or 9. If it was 2007, I was 8.
So you're a little bit old, a couple years older than your brother, 2 or 3 years.
Yes, yeah, I'm like 3.5 years older than Flynn, and he loved it. He still loves it. We still both love it. But at the time, I was pretty resistant to training, and I think part of that was, at like 8 or 9, you don't recognize that things that are hard are good for you. Like challenge is just not what you're looking for. It's not a benefit to you, and so I was trying everything I possibly could to get out of training. I tried a lot of other sports to see if I could find my niche in there. I tried theater, all these different things to say, no, I'm too busy. I can't do Easton. I can't train. But as I got older, I think I realized that resistance and that challenge actually made this really special, because what I was trying to figure out was whether or not I belonged in this community and in this space. And at the time, I think I thought, no, I don't. This is for boys. This is for my brother. This isn't something for me. And as I got older, I realized, no, actually, my being here is a really special opportunity to kind of push those boundaries and try something that is new, scary, difficult, but I can start to succeed at that, and I can give it my best try. And that's going to be a really unique and valuable experience. So the reason that I stayed with Easton is my brother. It is my family, and seeing the way that Easton shaped us as individuals and as a family, getting to learn from different people in the organization and at the academy, that was huge for me as a kid, as a teenager, and now as an adult, as a professional. I still learn something new from people every day. So we're very happy to still be here after, gosh, however many years that is.
I'll pay you for that marketing plug after, okay? From your Venmo handle, and I'll put that aside. I need my tissues here because I usually cry at least 4 or 5 times an episode. Make sure I have those nearby. That makes sense. Yeah, I remember. I was around then too, but I didn't take over till 2010. And I remember your dad always sitting in the back working on papers and talking to him every
Yes.
day. And I think I coached you for a while during some of that time. I'd be on the mats a lot, but I remember those days. Long, 14 years ago, 15 years ago. Um,
Yes.
so what is it like? Just let's fast forward a bit. So what's it like working with your brother? Like you're the Academy Operations Director. He is the Jiu-Jitsu department head, so he runs the Jiu-Jitsu in Boulder. Um, how does that work? I've seen you all work together, but from your perspective.
It's been amazing. And like I don't just say that like because we're family and I feel like I have to. Like I have learned so much about Flynn as a person through working with him and a lot about like myself and my relationship to him. I think when we found out that he was going to be offered that role, I was just ecstatic. Like I was so excited and happy because I feel like he's the perfect fit for it. And I don't just say that as a sister, but there was a part of me too that was like, okay, well, we're family and there's always going to be a family dynamic. Nah, man, like he is an adult and that's wild to me.
Yeah.
Working with him has taught me that. There are times, and I say this to him all the time, where we'll start a project and I'll kind of be like, okay, well, if you want, we'll sit and we'll do this together. And I can walk you through all these steps. And he'll go, I already did that. And I'm like, oh, awesome. Like you don't need me to do those things for you. Maybe never did. And that's kind of rewiring the older sister part of my brain that always wants to, kind of be there and be working with him. He's got this. Like we have a professional relationship that is built off of an existing trust from being family that just is 10 times better because he is like one of the most capable and smartest people that I know. And I've got to learn that about him through this.
When I think of Flynn, the other day we were in the academy, and I was like, "Man, you're so hairy. You're a man." Like he had his button up and chest hairs popping out. I'm like, "Who are you?" It's just like the mind fuck of it. Sometimes I'm always like so surprised. He's such a grown up adult human being.
It's wild. And he's so good at this too. Like that's like not that I don't think he could be, but there's always a part of me that's like, no, he's 12.
Yeah, of
And he'll
course.
always be that person to me. But no, he's amazing. And working with him is a treat. It's something that I know that a lot of people don't get to do. Like how often do you get to say that you work with your actual family and you love every second of it? Like
Yeah,
that's amazing.
yeah. He is pretty easy to get along with, and obviously so are you. Uh, yeah, Flynn's all in. He has an Easton tattoo on his arm, so he is
Yeah.
he is in. It's a beautiful thing. Uh, I have so much more on that, but I want to ask this: do you think your dad is going to be able to train again someday?
I hope he's watching this and he'll hear me say yes. But no, it's training is important to us. And I know it's important to us in different ways for, kind of each person in our household. So I want to say, yes, we never want to train anywhere else. We want to be in this for as long as we can. And, Flynn gets on me too I want to train more. I want to be here
Hard.
and to feel that part. It is hard. It's hard when, it's like, finding the balance between this is the place that I work and I'm here every day and those sorts of things. And also, can I come here and use it as a way to release tensions that I have around other aspects of my life and not feel like I'm here to work? So I think we all want to do that. And it's more fun when we all do it together.
The struggle is real. Like I have to set up certain training times. I'm like, today I have like, hey, you 5 people want to meet in Longmont at 3:00 to train super hard for 45 minutes because otherwise I struggle sometimes. Like if I was teaching consistently, it'd be different. I don't teach at all anymore, but it would be different because I'd be like, I'd have my classes that I teach to train in. So now it's like I have to find out when I can force myself to train because I do like it, but it's so much my work too that it's very challenging to separate the two when I'm there to train. Like while I'm training, I'm looking around thinking about what about that? Should we fix that? Or how do we change this? And just constantly working, and it doesn't feel like the release it did when I was just training. So I totally understand.
Yeah, it's trying to find a balance, and that not just for people in the academy who may see me and say like, hey, are you working? And my answer is always like, yeah, what do you need help with? But for me to say like, no, like if you're gonna do this, do it right. Don't try to pull yourself out. Don't try to much kind of like when I was a kid say like there's 1,000 other things I could be doing. No, be here to do the hard thing. Got to get back to that.
Yeah, and like exactly when you hey, I'm on the mat right now, don't bother me. You can that problem's gonna be there in 1 hour. So hey, no,
Yeah.
don't bother right now. Give me my hour. For me, my response like fuck off. Yours is probably much kinder, but like for me, it's like hey, fuck off right now. I need my space. Don't bother me.
Yes, and I think that happens in a lot of other ways too. Sometimes if I'm working on a project like at the academy, I will tell people, be like, "Hey, I'm going to close the door and I'm going to put in headphones because if I don't,
Yes.
I will find any excuse not to do this right now, and it needs to get done." So I feel that in a lot of different elements.
I always tell the general managers like, hey, after 3 p.m., throw the idea of work away. You're just there for the students at that point. The AOD can get away with some stuff, but the GM, it's like, hey, stop trying to do computer work after 3. It's gonna drive you crazy. You'll get
Yeah,
like,
it's
oh,
so
no, will
so
be
hustle and bustle.
exactly, exactly. So tell us more about what the job is like as an AOD in Boulder. I mean, AOD or any of these positions, DHs didn't exist when you first started, right? We had a kids department head. That was always a thing.
Mhm.
But we created jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai ones and AODs and program directors and all these different roles to help us have the best product and systems possible. So being at a school from the beginning, with just a general manager and a kids department head and instructors, and now to what it's like structurally, it's very different, I think. And you're sitting at the top in that organization chart. What is it like for you? What is that job like, the day to day? Your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think this job is kind of the ultimate puzzle solving job. So I came up through coaching and then the front desk kind of simultaneously, and held the department head role as the first impression specialist head, so the director of first impressions. And at all of those stages, I felt like those jobs were very people oriented, and it tapped into a lot of my enjoyment of performing, but also the anxiety of having to perform. Things like sales and working with people at the desk. That's a very like person facing position. The AOD position has been fantastic because I think it taps into the other part of what I enjoy, which is more just like, okay, I'm going to sit and I'm going to figure this out. Uh, Matt Bloss will joke that he's people and I'm numbers. And I really like that kind of breakdown. And we have a lot of crossover, but I think it's true that I do get to sit and work through the CRM system. I get to sit and work through people problems, but in a more kind of analytic way, looking at accounts, looking at ways to make things better for people. That's awesome. I love that part about my job. And there is still a really heavy, front desk element to it. There is sales training, there is interacting with the staff. But I feel like being able to see the behind the scenes of it from like a truly data analytic perspective makes that easier for me, because it is a little less performative. It's a little more like, okay, can I plug these pieces in and make it work for people? What can we order to make this easier? What can I fix to make this easier? Could we build something? Could we start a new SOP? I love that part of the job. So that's what I spend a lot of my time doing when I'm in the academy, answering questions and, making puzzles.
Yeah, no, we think about. I mean, they're all kind of this way. Like each department head and DFI plays a role, but the AOD and the GM, like they have to be a hive mind essentially. Like that's like a kind of a key thing. Like, oh, I'm going to be working on this, and I know what he or she is thinking, so I'll be over here working on this. It'll complement that. Or Matt has to deal with this problem client or whatever, or this issue. Matt's not here, but I'll fill in and know I know what he's going to say, so I'll say that for him since he's not here. There's like the synchronization that needs to happen for a really strong AOD GM relationship. And the more in sync you are, and that doesn't mean you believe the same things. Like Sachi and I, the first AOD GM combo, we're very different people. We share the same values, but very different people. We see the world differently. But she taught me a lot, quite a bit. And I think I taught her some things too. But we were always in sync with what the other one was thinking. Like, oh, how would Sachi want to handle this? Or how would Mike want to handle this? Okay, I can take that piece and put it into this admin side, and Mike can take that admin side that I built and put it into the people side, and we can build and work and I work on that together. And that collaboration between AOD and GM is so key. Like you need to be so connected, and if you are, the better your school runs, because two heads, man, is better than one in my opinion. Like at the end of the day, Matt's responsible. He's the one who gets in trouble if things go well, and hopefully you guys are the ones who get the accolades if things go. Sorry, Matt's in trouble if things go poorly. And hopefully you're the ones that get the accolades if things go well, right? But that's like the roles we have set up on purpose. And I think the way you two operate, you're always in the office together, you sit together, you're working together, you're operating together, you fill each other's gaps. That is like the point of the AOD, and you fully embrace that. And I also like that data and numbers versus the people. It doesn't always have to be that way, but that's the idea. Like, let the AOD finally take off over all that admin stuff you were doing before, so you can sit there and float and take care of all the departments and pay attention to these big things and make these, put out fires and just help the school grow, where the AOD make sure it's all beautiful and gorgeous in presentation. Yeah, there's so much to what you said, that there's so much nuance, that I think it's important that the AODs, all the AODs and GMs, really understand that. You gave me an idea while you're talking. Like, I wonder if we should do like a GM AOD meeting once a month, or once every 2 months, or every other month, where like the AODs sit in on the GM meeting, just so that we can hear their thoughts and how they're operating. Because I think there's a lot of different pieces happening with AOD. Some do it very different than the others, and the way you and Matt are doing it is how it was created and how it's supposed to go. So, just my thoughts.
I love to hear that, and because it sheds light on the relationship that we feel like we've built really organically too, which is awesome.
Yeah.
I have learned so much from Matt, and he makes me a better, not just like AOD, but person, and challenges the parts of myself that I am uncomfortable with. I am not a confrontational person. I do not like having hard conversations, but watching him have those talks and getting to kind of, like you said, step in when he's not there to do so, I think has made me like a better professional and just like a more attentive human being to, okay, well, is this the most pressing issue right now? How am I going to handle this emotionally, professionally, all those different things? And I feel really lucky that he's, one of my best friends. And so that, makes that relationship even cooler to me. But I've learned that from him, and I've learned it from Sarah too, coming up underneath her and watching their relationship in that way too. So we're just very, very lucky in Boulder, I would say.
Yeah, and to be clear, I don't think, unless they're a sociopath, I don't think anybody likes hard conversations.
That's fair.
It's just a matter of like, you just got to get used to it because it's part of the job. But I feel like no matter what the hard conversation is, I've been doing it for 20 years. It's just as hard every time. I just get slightly better at it each time, but it's still just as hard going into. Same anxiety,
Totally.
same
Yeah, it's a muscle that you have to work, and it's like the worst one to work,
It's
But
really,
but yeah, it's gotten easier with great leadership and great people to learn from.
it's like leg day every day. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh, so here's a question that I'm very curious about. I'm sure any of the admin would be curious. How do you feel about our CRM in wellness living?
Great question. So I guess the little bit of context is that I am the kind of temporary liaison between support for wellness living and the admin leaders. So the other AODs and DFIs, along with Sarah. We sit in those meetings together. I am new to CRMs with Easton. So every CRM that I've used, I have experienced with this group. And wellness living has unique pros and cons. There is so much that this software can do. I can see it in the way that it's designed and in playing with it and in being willing to fail with it. I've run 1,000 reports that have not generated information that I want. That being said, a lot of it doesn't work the way that we want it to. So the attitude that I have decided to take with it from here on out, as the kind of person in between both groups, is to say, this has been really fun to experiment with. Now it needs to work exactly the way that we think it will, or we need to change. So that has been a change in my attitude as well. I think as a person, I'm more someone who's like, no, that's great. Like, whatever you want, let's figure it out. This has been an opportunity to say, no, like, if this is not functioning, it needs to be fixed. And not just fixed so it won't break again, but fixed in a logical way. Really kind of demanding that the software work for us is something that I think is really important about this system, because it is imperfect. And I'm comfortable saying it's imperfect. I say to people quite frequently, like, I'm not here to defend the CRM that we're using. I would like to make it work better with the tools at my disposal.
Yeah, we did that DH offsite, and there was great feedback. Like, not all CRMs are perfect. This is just they all have their issues. Um, and we have a fractional finance guy coming in to help us with some items, and he's very experienced with MBO and wellness living. Um,
Oh, great.
he hasn't used it the way we use it, but he had some optimistic things to say about wellness living. But yeah, like to your point, like our job isn't to defend it, but this is what we have, and we have to find a way to make it work for us. And I like that. I like that point, because sometimes you get on your heels. You're like, yeah, I know it doesn't work, but what about this? And that doesn't help anybody, and it makes you come off as defensive. It's like, yes, that is the issue, but this is what we have, and this is what we need. We've gone to market. We've tried so many different ones. Like, nothing works for what we need. And right now, this is the best we have. And I feel, for me, the hardest thing for me with all of it is the instructors and the DFI, the front desk, the FSIs, the first impression specialists, because they're the ones that are dealing with the things that are breaking or not working, and they're sitting in the maelstrom of the members needing help. Like, it's one thing being in the office, like, oh, this is frustrating, it's not working. But when you're sitting there and a member needs something and you can't give it to them, and there's a line of people building up, and that is where I'm like, I feel really bad, because that is so inefficient for our team. And that's everything else behind the scenes. We'll just break something, do whatever you need to do to get through it. We'll figure it out. But when the front line and the members have to deal with it, that's what I'm like, man, I want to blow this software up, because that pisses me off, because we courted this company for a very long time, and all the things that are issues were promises that they made that were not issues.
Right.
That's why we chose them. So that's why it's really a struggle. But I appreciate, and I think you're the right one to be handling this. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. It is another big puzzle. And yeah, it's not like a pretty process. So I appreciate everybody's patience with it. There are often times where I feel like, issues get brought and my response is like, I'm sorry, because there isn't something that I can do right now, but let's see if it's part of a larger problem. And I would say 80% of the time what we've found out is like, it is. It's not just a one-off thing. It's something that's endemic and we can fix it. So we've been in the process of making a lot of those changes that have been a compilation of everybody across all locations saying, hey, this isn't working. Hey, this isn't tracking. I found this one example. We've stitched together, 100 of those things. And just this week even have made major progress. So again, I appreciate everybody's patience with it. And I hope that we can keep solving problems.
I know anybody that's listening to call out the fact that we know we've fixed issues and it breaks something else. So like, they're going to hear this and roll their eyes. Like, we also are aware that, like, when we say, yes, this is fixed, we also recognize that every time we've said that thus far, something else breaks or it doesn't stay fixed for long. So we're aware of that too. So we're not saying this is like, yeah, we're good to move forward. We recognize that it's still an ongoing issue, and we'll see that it's fixed when it actually works for more than 2 weeks.
Yes. Yeah. If anything, it just feels like I have pretty good job security.
Right? My God. So let's pivot a little bit. What does your life look like outside of Easton?
Yeah, so outside of Easton, I am a PhD candidate at the University of Colorado in the history department. And that is my big other part of myself that keeps me busy. I love research, I love teaching, and I am, deeply entrenched in academia. So that is, if I'm not at Easton, I'm usually at school.
Do you have an office on campus, or is that because you're a teacher there? What does it look like for you?
I have a cubicle that I have begged the library to give me. No, so for grad students in our department, we have a communal space where a lot of us will work and meet. And I have a cohort of people that I work with. But I will bounce around between classes that I'm assisting with. In the fall, I get to teach my very own class, which I'm super, super excited about. It is the very first time that it's my syllabus and I'm the instructor of record. But if not there, then I'm usually in the library where I have a little desk and a lot of books, which, as you can see, is kind of my aesthetic. So
Yeah, I love it. So you're a PhD candidate. So in history, what exactly are you studying? In what's the deeper story?
yeah.
What's the thesis? What's going on? Tell me.
So I work on the history of gender representation and censorship in visual media in the 20th century, which is my kind of long-winded way of saying that I actually study comic books and graphic novels, which is fantastic. I love that I get to do this. I can't believe that I've found a university and a department that will let me work on the things that I'm passionate about as my gig. So my dissertation is going to focus on comic book censorship in the 1950s and the kind of stepping stones that it takes from the 50s to the 2020s in terms of looking at women in censorship roles and how they've pushed certain agendas through censorship organizations. So I love it. I also get to look at gender representation in comics literature. So I look a lot at Wonder Woman. I look a lot at Scarlet Witch in the Marvel Universe and the ways that those characters kind of transform into real world identities that we see, how they negotiate cultural and social changes from the 40s to now. So it's amazing. I'm so happy that to get to talk to you about it because it's the thing that I love doing. And I'm really lucky to be able to do that.
Well, I want to keep this conversation going then. I want to ask before I do you know, I think I've asked you this before, William Cuskin, I think, the graphic novels professor?
I do. I was on a panel with William Cuskin in November, actually. It was a bunch of faculty, and then they said, hey, did you want to do this as the grad student who's into comics? And I was like, yes, but I love William Cuskin. He's fantastic.
Yeah, he was one. I think my freshman year I took his graphic novels class, and I became an English major shortly after that. And he was fantastic. It was. I was like, wow, you get to study this in college. This is cool. Every English class after that sucked, but that one was super cool.
That one, I took Stephen Graham Jones's version of that class. We had William Cuskin as like a speaker one time, but same deal. I have a degree in English literature and a degree in history as my BAs because I was like, no way, like this is amazing. You can do this all the time and it's fun and it's awesome. So I have, my emphases are in romantic literature and comic books.
All right. Okay, good. I love it. That's amazing. So part of what sparked this conversation about a lot of things I wanted to have on the podcast for a while, but we got into a conversation around the hero's journey and it transitioned. Well, I think it started her explaining to me about the heroine's journey and the hero's journey, like Joseph Campbell. What is it? Something of a Thousand Faces. What's the name of the book?
Hero with a Thousand Faces.
Hero with a Thousand Faces. Like, brilliant work on the hero's journey, like going back to like the Odyssey and from there. I don't understand it all. Obviously, I've read some of it, and I find it more. It's part of like our culture and our life, and how we look at stories and how we look at our life. But Vi brought in the heroine's journey, which really, really stuck out to me. Like it hit me in a way that I was like, wow, I'd never thought of this before because it felt like the way she described. I'm going to butcher this, but I want to do this first so she can clarify. The way I understood, like you finish your hero's journey, and then like life proceeds the way it should, but it's really just kind of the middle path, the beginning of like the real growth that happens, which is the heroine's journey. And I found this like just emotionally mind-blowing. I'm thinking about it now like, wow. And I've told this story since we've had our discussion with the whiteboard where you explained it to me to multiple people because it resonated so much about like how the path keeps going. So let me hand it off to you and just kind of, I don't know, I just want to hand it off to you. I don't want you to ask a question. Go.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that means a lot to me that made such an impact on you because it's one of those stories that I have tried to incorporate into a lot of my work and my life. And I love talking about it with people. So for you to have taken the time that day to like sit and just listen to me ramble about it was amazing. So thank you for doing that. My goal in doing that too was just to get you to stay 15 more minutes to say hi to Flynn, who was coming. And then we stayed for like a whole other hour. But your coverage of the heroine's journey there is fantastic. The hero's journey, right, is that multicultural idea that every society has this story where there is a single person who is faced with a challenge. They don't want to go. They eventually have to undergo trials. It takes them to the bottom of the barrel. They feel like they've lost a part of themselves or people on the journey, but they inevitably come out with the boon, with the elixir, and say, I am a different person and I am here to either fix society or, end the war, whatever it is, but I am a new individual. And so the hero's journey ends in that cycle. I return with the elixir. I am wiser, better for it. The heroine's journey, which came about in 1990 as a result of Maureen Murdoch, who was a student of Joseph Campbell's, says that is not the end of somebody's cycle. It can't be, because when the hero returns with the elixir, they are a completely changed person. And while their world may be better, they still have work to do internally to grapple with the fact that they have lost a part of themselves and they need to reintegrate with what is new. Now, scholars from this kind of 90s moment of thinking about the heroine's journey couch this in masculine and feminine identities. But this is a completely genderless concept. Anybody, regardless of your gender, can undergo a hero's journey. And what this kind of new scholarship encourages is that everybody should also undergo a heroine's journey. A heroine's journey called as such because specifically Campbell didn't really take women into account in his stories. Women who might have felt displaced by the world changing around them. So the heroine's journey encourages us to say, I am a new individual. What does that mean for me to grieve the loss of who we were before and go forward and say, I will reckon with the internal parts of myself as much as I have reckoned with the external parts of myself. It is a fascinating story. We see it more and more in pieces of literature, but most often what we're encountering in popular culture is the hero's journey. We as individuals can undertake the heroine's journey and start to tell more diverse stories as a result of it.
Can you give us some examples of a it can be from literature, it can be from a personal example, I don't care, whatever, maybe something that'll resonate with the crowd about a hero's journey, then the next step to a heroine's journey, to put it more front and center for them in their mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So a hero's journey is something that looks like Star Wars. That's like the most classic example of a hero's journey, right? Luke Skywalker gets called by the wise old man and he goes out. He doesn't want to go, but he faces all these challenges. And then at the end, he succeeds. But a heroine's journey is something that's going to look more like recently Everything Everywhere All at Once or Moonlight, films that are more about trying to find who you are after you've lost or changed a part of yourself, where the world is no longer the same. And rather than try to change you or change the world around you, you're trying to change your perspective on who it is and your response to it. Another example, which I think is an interesting one to kind of base this dichotomy around, is that Wonder Woman is a hero's journey. Diana is in the masculine role of a hero. To undergo a heroine's journey, she would need to grapple then again with what happens when she is in man's world, and now she can't go back to just being like, the naive, the princess, the outsider. So it's interesting because I think a lot of people, when they hear these phrases hero and heroine, will assign a gendered connotation to them that actually doesn't really exist. It exists in the scholarship about why we formed this story. But like I said, this is a genderless process that we could all undergo. From like a real life perspective, I think we were having this conversation the other day. It may be, for the housewife, she gets everything that she wants, right? She starts in her ordinary small town. She goes through I'm thinking like 1950s housewifery. She goes through the cycle of finding somebody, getting married, having a family, and that is supposed to be her hero's journey. She's left the ordinary and is now a new person, but she's not happy. And so now what does she do? She has to reintegrate those parts of herself that she feels like she's lost, either in becoming a wife or in becoming a mother or something like that. This is not to like spit on housewifery. This is just to say that this can happen at any level of storytelling. Any individual person can undergo this journey if they're aware of it. So I would push all of us to undergo a heroine's journey, to reintegrate with the parts of ourselves that we've lost in becoming new and better people, because I think it makes us more emotionally aware, more emotionally intelligent.
This is one of those times where I really wish like we had more people that follow this podcast, so we can I don't know how many people actually listen. This is more for me, and there are a lot of people that check in like, man, I love the podcast, I listen to it all the time, where I would love to see the comment thread. You know what I mean? Because I find I had one with Allie yesterday too, and this, I just find it so interesting and like how much it resonates with me, and something about putting like labels on things really helps us. Like obviously everything's a construct, like the words of hero or heroine, it doesn't really have to be those words, right? These are things and experiences that happened to us, and we've labeled them as such because it's the way the academics labeled it, and that's what we use as the label, right? And I hope when people hear these things, they don't throw the ideas away because they don't like the name of it. You know what I mean? I know that's a silly thing, but this is super important for people to understand. Like, words are important, and labels are important to help us identify the world, to categorize what we're looking at, what we're seeing. But at the same time, you also need to throw them away, right? Like, throw them away so you can just sort of get rid of that subjective feeling you have when you hear or see or what this idea, and just let it like wash over you. And I think that's a really important part. And I know I say this, for me, that seems so normal now. But in my 20s, early 20s, like, I was super like bro Boston masculine guy, and I'd be like, oh, heroin, I don't need to learn anything about that, because I'm a guy. And now it's obviously I feel wildly different about how I view the world and how I see it. And I think this idea of the heroine's journey is extremely important for people of all ages, but like men and women in their 20s. Like, this is something that is extremely profound, because it says, hey, okay, well, I'm supposed to be doing this now in this world, but wait a minute, I haven't healed my inner self yet. And instead they just deal with anxiety and confusion and they're lost and they don't know what to do with it. And I think this idea of the heroine's journey helps give them a path of like, oh, everybody goes through this. This is just my heroine's journey to go through the next path, and I don't have to be stuck here. And I can see light at the end of the tunnel. There's something very liberating about this for me that I just can't stop thinking about it. I also, by the way, I love that you used, Vi and I spoke a while about A24 films. I love that you used two A24 films as examples. If you haven't watched A24 films, those are the ones that like you watch and you're going to feel. Yeah,
they're going to make or break you.
During or after, but like, they're not ones I watch before bed. Because like you read those or you watch those, it's like, man, you go to bed, which is when you watch movies, but you go to bed and you can't sleep because like it does something to your entire physiology and your mindset that you're going to sleep like, I can't stop. What just stirred in me? So if you want beautiful film work, like Moonlight is, I think, an Oscar, and so is an Oscar-winning movie and for Best Picture. So is the other one, I can never remember the full name of it. Everything Everywhere all at once. Yeah. They make incredibly beautiful films outside of that blockbuster realm. So I highly recommend checking out them. And I think every single one is available on HBO. So they're part of that. So just want to put that plug there.
No, it's amazing. And I think there's value too in seeing that these stories can still be told in like blockbuster formats. Even, A24 is fantastic, but I think, as we said, like 50% of those movies I can't handle. Like they are so far afield of like what I am equipped for that I just like can't do it. But that, I think, leaves a cool opening where even things like Marvel, DC, Disney, if they can start to grapple with this idea of like there are more stories to be told, if we see beyond what we've already done, there's so much potential in there. Let's keep telling heroes' journey stories. Those are amazing. And there are a lot of people who have never seen themselves in a hero's journey story. It's part of why I love superhero comics and stories more generally, because you can plug people into that formula and have something brand new. Wonder Woman was that for me. But even films like Black Panther, Captain Marvel, those sorts of stories are still reinventing the hero's journey because, as you've said, they've challenged the label. So then if we can do the same thing with the heroine's journey and start telling those in-depth stories about the self and about reintegrating with familiar faces, familiar characters, that's such an amazing opportunity there. So I really hope to see something like that. If we can do it on a blockbuster level, great. If we can do it as individuals, though, even better.
I have so many more questions I want to ask, and we have like 20 minutes left, but there's one I have to ask that just came to me that I'm super curious. Tell me about Batman. Tell me about Batman and where you stand. And I know there's a wide gamut of Batman out there, from the movies that are wildly different, from 80s movies to 90s to the Christopher Nolan stuff to the one that Robert, what's his name, just did. Then there's obviously the wide gamut of comic books. Then there's all the Batman cartoons from like The Brave and the Bold, which is hysterical if you haven't watched them. I love The Brave and the Bold, but there's also the 90s ones. There's just such a wide array of Batman and Batman depictions But from Batman the figure, the archetype, what are your thoughts on that from your perspective of really understanding this graphic novel
Yeah.
and
All right. You're tapping into
world?
like my, yes,
How to
you're tapping into
explain
my
all
like
of it.
deep nerd side, which is fantastic.
That's not what I'm so excited.
So Batman is a member of the Trinity, right? You have Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman. They come about the same time, and DC holds them up as their like cornerstone figures. Superman is always going to be the perfect man. Unfortunately, we run out of like interesting stories to tell with Superman because DC will never let him be anything but Superman, right? Wonder Woman is really controversial, and I think she'll always be that way. She has really phenomenal stories to tell. She has been a historical figure for so long. We negotiate things like feminism and belonging through Wonder Woman. Batman. Batman, I think it's diametrically opposed, adaptations. There is the like vigilante Batman that is so entrenched in his grief, but also in the grit of his world, that I think it loses the actual essence of the Batman story. The adaptation, on the other hand, that I think is really valuable with Batman is about family and about how you can construct belonging in a group that is not just, your immediate kin. The kind of Bat fam stories where you're talking about Robin and Dick Grayson and, all those, there's a billion adaptations of the Bat family. That's where I think the Batman story matters. And that's where it comes from, even in the 40s, is the loss of Bruce Wayne's parents shape him into this person where he's having to grapple with all of his darkest feelings about loss and not being able to have kind of the reincarnation of what was. And also he's fighting crime. If we can kind of sideline the fighting crime and focus more on the fact that this is a story about a man who is grieving, that's amazing. Like that's a powerful story that I think resonates with a lot more people than kind of rough them up crime fighters. The Robert Pattinson Batman I think is really interesting because it's starting to walk that line of how serious a story can we tell with a caped character, a masked character, because superheroes are, you're always kind of negotiating whether or not this is for kids. But the Batman archetype I think has the potential to tell that really intense but ultimately beautiful story about kind of found family. If you do it right. Now, that being said, I love the Adam West Batman. I love that kind of the almost high camp that you can do with that character because it is a superhero from the 40s and we should recognize when they're silly. But it's, the Trinity each have a specific story that they're able to tell. And I think we're kind of better exploring Batman now. I would say the best adaptation of Batman in that realm is going to be Frank Miller's The Dark Knight. But that's like a classic answer to that. And even then the kind of Christopher Nolan adaptations of that from there. As long as they can walk that fine line. Those are my thoughts on Batman as somebody who is not specifically a Batman fan.
Do you think gender plays into it? Because there's the theme, there's Wonder Woman, and then there's Batman, and then there's Superman. As a kid, like I loved Superman. As I got older, I got more and more into loving Batman. I've always enjoyed Wonder Woman for many different things, many different reasons across the board. From being, a prepubescent boy, like wow, she's beautiful. You know what I mean? To the wow, she represents pure power, or like wow, she's the real boss, or like there's like these in my simple terms, right? And I think, do you think like the way the public identifies with each one of those individuals is, do you think a lot of it is based on gender? Like, do you see yourself in, because we talked a lot about this. Remember this, Allie and I talked a lot about like women in leadership. I'm going to bring this together in a second. And we see something she said, like, I'd love to see more women in leadership. And if we looked around the DH offsite, it was a lot of females in leadership at Easton. But at the same time, she's like, the more we see there, the more we can see ourselves there. So like, it's hard to see yourself, like for Allie to see herself in me, right? But if she can see herself in Sarah, right? So that really helps. Like, oh, I see what I can do that too when it's a female in that same spot. Do you think that it's the same in comics? Like, is it obvious that you're gonna have more genders kind of leaning towards female, feminine or female identification genders leaning towards Wonder Woman versus Batman versus Superman? And then is it, because for me, like as I grew up personally, like I'm Superman, I'm tough, blah, 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 I can do anything, I want to be invincible, and that's why I wanted to fight and all that stuff. And then later on, I saw Batman, like, man, Batman gets beaten down and always comes back. And I was like, ooh, I like that more. I want to be more like Batman. And then like how he's like cold, but there's actually like this deep love inside that he doesn't know how to release because of the trauma. And I'm curious if you believe from your academic perspective if that's like a male female thing, or if it's easier to identify with them regardless of gender, depending on how you feel.
I think it at this moment that we're experiencing now, it is easier for like feminine identifying genders to move towards female characters, but that's not necessarily a gender thing. I think that's a matter of the availability of representation. And I think there are lots of characters, regardless of their gender, that I personally could pull from. But I haven't had the opportunity to see what feels like myself on screen or in media. And so the first time that happened, it was earth-shattering. There's like a relatively well-documented phenomenon that women in the Wonder Woman movie, sitting in the theater, would start crying. And I was one of those people where I was like, oh my God, like what's going on? Like, it's not a sad part of this movie. Like, what's happening? And then for the first time, it was like, oh my gosh, like that could be me. I get it now. Is this what it's like to like go into a movie every time and feel like that is someone that I could replicate? That was an insane feeling for me. And it is, I would say, 90% of the reason that I pursued the academic track that I did, that I'm so entrenched in this, wanting that feeling again and wanting to find where it comes from. I owe it to that moment of seeing myself on screen for the first time. So yes, there are ways to identify with characters of different genders, but I think what we need to see first is a plurality to choose from. I shouldn't have to only pick from female characters, and I don't think that I do, but there should be a wide array of them for me to first go through that process with before I start negotiating myself through other people. So that idea of like, you can't be what you can't see, I think is complicated, right? Obviously, somebody has to be the first, but we should continue to say, okay, what have we not seen yet? Where do we still need women in leadership? Where do we still need women in film, in comics, in literature, to be able to negotiate that moment and then go from there? Because you should have men or masculine identifying people who can see themselves in Wonder Woman or who can see themselves in leadership. There is a plurality for them to choose from. Let's get to a plurality with more diverse representation, and then we can start really exploring what that looks like.
Man, I love it. Obviously, while I'm speaking, I'm displaying my incredible ignorance on this entire subject. So I want to make sure I put that couch all of my conversation with that. What Allie and I spoke about yesterday a little bit was how hard it, like for me, it took a while to figure out like the level of, like, obviously, as I said yesterday, like I'm a white male in America. I'm very fortunate. It's hard for me to, I'm not a minority. I'm very lucky with how I was born into this world. And it takes a lot of paying attention, at least, and really paying attention to see the difference of how things are. And what I mean by that, like when it finally like hits you, like, oh, things are different. Like, for example, you can look back at the 80s movies. It's all hero based by men, right? Like from Terminator 2 Judgment Day, with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and all these characters were all male driven. All the blockbusters were men in the limelight. And it's a cool, as a boy, like my whole life, I just lived for all those movies. I'd stay up late watching. I'd be punching the air, and I'm like, I want to be like these men. And maybe there was more representation on the female side. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to it. I wasn't looking for it, but I don't think so. I look back and I view the movies. I view the blockbusters. I view what was available on television constantly. And even today, I was watching. I think I told you this. I was watching Migration, that new cartoon, and the male bird, the dad bird, was the decider. I mean, he was insecure and worried and concerned and all that. So they represented like a more insecure male, which was good, I guess. But the way they represented him in that moment, I'm watching with my older sister, my wife, and I'm like, I had a hard time. I was like, this is not how it is. This isn't, and where do they see themselves in this? Like, what is my, like, obviously my wife and sister are older, right? But if I had daughters watching that movie, I'd be like, I don't agree with how they're representing the female in this role. Like, it's just, she's like, honey, it'll be okay. Like, she's comforting him. She's like making him feel okay so he can make the right decision. And it really bothered me, like, a lot. And I think about how hard, and like we're in a progressive state of this culture than it was 20, 30 years ago. And that's why I'm excited to have these conversations. Like, it takes so long and so much work to open your eyes, and then you finally see it. The curtains come down and you're like, holy shit, look at this misrepresentation. It's everywhere. And it's so hard to fill those gaps. Like, because film, they're like, well, we have to make money, so we're going to do it this way because these are the people that want to see it. Maybe, I don't know. Wonder Woman crushed it. But in the workplace too, it's like, how do we keep making sure the opportunity, because I'm a big believer in meritocracy, fucking regardless of gender, regardless of religious, regardless of faith, regardless of color, we want whoever is the best at their job that is also a great team player. Those are the ones we want to move into good positions. But at the same time, we also want to make sure there's fair representation for everybody to see themselves in the future, And I don't know. I don't have a question for that. It's just something that's been on my mind a lot.
I think it's super
lately.
important. It hits home something that I feel really strongly about, which is that it should not be the job of the only woman in the room to have this conversation. Like, your attention to it is exactly what we need, because there are going to be rooms that women are not in yet. And not just women, but people of any kind of marginalized background, right? We are really still in a moment where we're trying to negotiate who belongs where and how we can get people into those spheres. But those rooms need to become self-aware, maybe a little heroine's journey for them. They need to do a little introspection to realize that they need to be making those changes as well. It cannot just be one woman saying, hey, no, that's uncomfortable. That's not appropriate. That is getting down to some level of tokenism, right? It needs to be on the onus of every person in every sphere to say, hang on, like, have we thought this through? Like, can we challenge this boundary? Can we challenge this cultural norm? What is that going to do for us? Who is that going to invite into this space who hasn't been there before? That is so hard to do because it makes us uncomfortable, and it challenges preconceptions that we may not even know that we have about other people. But we have to undergo that process because it is exhausting for the people who do make it into that room to suddenly be like, oh my gosh, my only job is to speak on behalf of all women. No, we can't continue to have that divide. And I think that's something that we have done really well at Easton, is to continue to leave the door open behind us for people to come in and continue to challenge whatever boundaries we have in place, whatever preconceptions we have. But there's always more work to do. Not just with us, with everybody. And that's an amazing challenge to have, because then we get to be the trendsetters. We get to be the people who are going to set the new norm, and then somebody can come after us and say, hey, let's take it even further. So that's an amazing opportunity for us to have.
And we're in the martial arts world, and I think it's beautiful that we get to, which has been male dominated for a very long time, and I think it's really cool to be able to change that, I love being
to say
part of that.
That we welcome everybody is amazing, right? Like, that is something that our industry in particular, like, does not do well. And now we can take the next step, which is to say, not only do we welcome everybody, but we recognize that everyone is here for a different reason. And if we can start to address those reasons individually, we can start to make things better for specific groups, right? Women will come to this sport for lots of different reasons. Women will come to martial arts for lots of different reasons, but they are not the only minority that is going to face specific challenges for their identity group. So we can start to negotiate that. We can start to have those hard conversations, and we can be the industry change if we can take that step. Like, that's phenomenal. So all of that is to say thank you for the work that you've done to make that possible. Like I said, 8-year-old me did not think that I would see myself here. And so that's why I was resistant to it. 25-year-old me knows I belong here, and I can't wait to see who comes after me and says the same thing.
Ditto. Thank you. I appreciate it. Uh, well, that was beautiful. Let's pivot to some more lighthearted talks for a minute, and then we'll do our closing. Uh, I hope everybody gets to pay attention to that part because that was a lot of fun. I always, when diving into that realm of discussion, I'm very intimidated sometimes that I'm going to say the wrong thing or slip up. But I appreciate you giving me the patience to express myself while trying to and being understanding
Always.
with my
That's
ignorance.
how we have conversations. We can't just shut down. Let's say that we're learning and keep going.
Beautiful. All right, so this question I pulled out just for you because I look at your family, like your mom Jen and your dad Nick and Flynn. I think you're like an incredible family. Like I'm a dad of two kids, a beautiful wife Emily, and we try hard with our kids, like to raise them the best they can. And I'm not always the best dad. Like I have some, I'm an emotional person, but I try to work on it. But I look at your family as like one of those ones I look to, like, well, how would the Burlews do it? Because I think it's important. I have a few families that I look to, like, okay, what would they do in this instance? Because their kids have turned out well adjusted and they're still connected with their parents. And that's something that I value. I want my kids to still want to be around me as they get older. Like that's probably one of my biggest goals in life. So I pulled this question out for you because I was curious. What could, if you could change anything about the way you were raised,
Oh my
what would
gosh,
it be?
that's not where I thought that was going at all.
I know.
Oh
That was the
man.
point.
Um, I I would not change anything about my relationship with my family. I think if anything, what I would change is my own concept of like failure. Like I would change the idea that I was so scared to fail all the time, and I'm still that person. And I don't necessarily have a reason to be because my family supports failure as a way to make mistakes, like, and as a way to learn from it. So I think, that's might be a hardwiring thing for me to say, like, I needed to be more comfortable with the idea that, like, it's okay to get a bad grade and it's okay to try something, not like it, and have spent the time to do it, to be challenged by things. Um, because in our house growing up, like, it was always like, you can try whatever, just give it your best effort before you say that it's not working for you. And in that environment, in that atmosphere, I think there are a lot of opportunities maybe I wish I had taken, but that I was too scared to take, but that my parents pushed me to do. So maybe it's in there, continue to push me to do scary things. But I say that knowing full well that my dad and I in particular have conversations almost every day where he says, lean in, go for the thing that's really scary, because the worst that's going to happen is somebody's going to say no. So, and then having the same conversations with my mom almost every day where it's like, hey, I'm thinking about trying this new thing. And she's like, well, why wouldn't you? Like, go for it, do it. Like, that's amazing. Yeah, if I go on too long, I will get emotional about it. But I love my parents. I love my brother, and the space that we are in to try the things that we love and to fail safely. That's amazing. I can't imagine a better way to have grown up.
Yeah, I thought. Okay. You remind me of like Angela Duckworth or Carol Dweck or both of those. Like Angela Duckworth talks a lot about that. One of her rules in her book Grit is talking about how her kids always have to do something challenging and like don't quit until you truly give it a shot and or finish the season at least. I really love. Yeah, I love that. I love that, and that whole mindset is really important to me, and I agree with it wholeheartedly. And it's something that I definitely tried to take on. I think for me, where I struggle is like, I think I just get a little bit. My kids can see the frustration on my face when I'm mad they're not doing it at their best. I'm like, you're better than that. What the fuck? They see. And people at Easton see it too. Like I very much, if I'm coaching, I'm like, I know you're better. Like, what the fuck are you doing? You're not giving your best. And that is something that I need to work on because I think it creates anxiety for the people around me. Like, they're watching, does he approve of what's happening? And if I'm like this, it's obvious I don't, which I think ends up hurting people more than helping in a way. Like, it's not supportive. It's more like, oh, I'm letting him down, and then it just self-perpetuates into
No,
anxiety.
I get
So
that, and
anyway,
it's
just made me think.
yeah, I don't ever think I felt like I was under pressure, like what would happen if I failed, which I think is
That's what I'm saying. Your
that's
parents are great about that. They're so patient and kind, but also you guys have excelled at
that is a
everything.
credit to
So
them,
it's
and I'm trying to like put a bow on it, only because I know that they're going to listen to this, and so all I really want to say to them is like thank you, because they're the ones that brought us here, they're the ones that pay for it, they're the ones that drove us, they're the ones that said no, we get that it's hard, like you're going to
yeah.
keep going, and so I don't know who I would be without Easton or without them. So
I need an injection of their patience. All right, here's another question.
So that's
So I'm at like 3. I'm at 3. We're gonna start doing a counter
I love that
on the
like in the
podcast
box
for
at
how
the
many
bottom.
times I cry. Record's 5. Yeah, a picture of Mike crying, or maybe it'll be like the guy from Dawson's Creek, that funny video, him crying. Anyway, let's see. These are all new. This is a new one too that I put up for you. What do you value most in friendship?
Oh my gosh, I think probably honesty. Um, as a kind of like anxious person, there's always a part of my brain that I'm kind of at war with. That's like, did I say the right thing? Are they being truthful to me when they say no, it's okay? And so I think like the practice of being like, hey, like, can we have a serious conversation about something that like didn't sit right with me, or I am really proud of you, and here are the reasons why. Like being able to say those things out loud, I really value. And I've had like hard conversations with people who I consider to be some of my best friends, and I think our relationship got stronger because of that. So that matters a lot to me.
Yeah, it bonds you in blood, if you will. Those hard conversations. It's like that next
and I've
level.
cried through all of them. So it's like one of those, like, if you can see that side of me and we can go forward from it, like that's amazing.
All right, here's a question I asked everybody, and I agree with you. Honesty is one of my biggest. It's to my detriment. It also hurts. Like if I feel like a slight at all, like I'm like, no, you lied to me. Like we promised we were gonna do this, and then we're gonna eat no sugar for the day, and then I find a chocolate bar wrapper in the trash or something. I'm like, what is this? You betrayed me, and I will hold on to that for 10 years. Like, that was a betrayal of my trust. And they're like, well, I didn't see it as a big deal. I'm like, well, I do, but I don't. I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's stuck here now, and I can't get rid of it. So yeah, honesty is a big one. What does that say about me, though? Who knows? We'll get a different story. Therapy. All right, this is my favorite one. I think about this one a lot, and this helps me kind of like look at my life and what I'm doing. I chose 65 as the age when, if you have kids or whatever, like you're still able to do pretty much everything, but you're towards the twilight years. So when you're 65 years old, what does the dinner table look like for you in your ideal future? Like, who is there? Where are you? Any details you want to add? Just
I would say I want to be there with my family. I do see myself as someone who really wants that someday. Where I'm at right now.
So family, like
partner and kids.
I
think that would be phenomenal. Whenever I feel ready for that, I think at the point I'm at in my life right now, like I'm pretty happy with me and finding out different things about myself. But at 65, my partner and kids, a dinner table that can move different places. So I would really like us to be able to kind of go and see the world together and experience that. I foresee my future and my career as hopefully taking me lots of different places as I continue to pursue research and new ideas and things. So I think that would be great. Dogs would be awesome. I think just something that is comfortable and happy and something that I look forward to every day, that my dinner table is a place that I look forward to going to.
Awesome. I love it. All right, closing portion. Some of these are kind of on the cuff, so if you don't have answers, that's fine. Obviously, what are your favorite books, and what are you currently reading?
My favorite book, like ever, is Wicked by Gregory Maguire and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Those two go together, and they were just like formative texts for me when I was kind of at the right age. They're both like fiction but Frankenstein is like a lifelong one for me. That's been amazing. But what I am reading right now is almost always going to be related to school. So I'm always reading right now. So I would say, let me like turning to see which one might be the best pick. Yeah.
Yeah, something that the
Yeah.
masses
Let's
could.
do this one because I reread this all the time. So this is The Secret History of Wonder Woman by Jill Lepore. And this is the book that like got me started on my career after kind of seeing the film, and I think is relevant to our conversation now. But it is also one of those books that shows you how complicated people can be and how much we maybe don't know about the past. And when we think about historical actors as like boring or naive or things like that, this book will challenge your concept of what people were doing in the 30s and the 40s and who we are now. And it goes through Wonder Woman. Like that's amazing. So it also shows the relevance of something that was created over 80 years ago. This is my second copy of this book because there's another one up there that's signed that I love. So yeah, I have this on my desk probably every day that I'm working from.
Wow, I've been getting some interesting books from people. That was super cool. Let's see. Do you have feedback for me, or how we can do better, or how Easton can do better, or how I can do better?
Man, I feel like the presence of HQ at the schools and the presence of PDs at the schools has been amazing. And I would say, like, if there's one thing that we could really keep doing to keep growing, it is to make sure that even the people in those seats see what everyday life is like on the ground. Because that helps us identify problems that you don't necessarily have to fix, but that AODs can fix, that GMs can fix. But it also maybe illuminates tangible realities that are missed when we think about, well, this is how a class should run. Well, in Boulder, these are the specifics that we've had to deal with. How can we add those to the process? Having you all around recently has been amazing. So I would say that is something that I'd like to keep seeing.
I love that. All right. So you're working on your PhD. What happens upon completion?
I would love a job. That's like such a grad student answer. No, so I have 2 years left with my PhD until I hit degree completion, and then at that point, I'd like to see kind of where I'm at, who I am, what I'm interested in. If I could have my cake and eat it too, I would be involved with Easton forever. In some capacity, because I love these people. You guys give me a sense of stability and kind of where I belong. And if I could do that and teach, if I could do that and lecture, if I could do that and write books and things like that, I'd be very, very happy. So I hope in 2 years that my dissertation is viable enough to turn into a publication right away and that it gets picked up in things. But for history, for PhD, it's really hard to get a job. So that's why I say that kind of, in jest. But I would be happy doing a version of what I am doing now for quite some time.
So stay in academia, maybe stay local so you can be where your parents and family and be able to see around Easton. But also be able to travel a lot.
I've told
for
Matt Blass my
research.
Dream scenario is that CU hires me, which is it's a very difficult thing to have happen, but that would be amazing. So that I could stay with Easton, be doing CU, and then if y'all will let me, I'll go do 6 weeks in London every year. That's where we can make that happen.
I want to join you. Okay, the closing question. What in your life are you most grateful for?
Without a doubt, it is my family, my mom, my dad, and my brother. They are the people who push me to do hard things, who make me a better person, but who also show me what paths are available, whether or not it's something I've considered before. And I would say specifically Flynn is the person that I am most grateful to have. He is every part of my world that I find value in. So yeah, I don't know where I would be without any of them, and I'm just so lucky to have them in so many different ways in my life.
Talk about like the parents, like the proudest moment for a parent to hear that from their kid. I hope your parents will listen to this podcast. I know they will. Vi, that was fucking amazing. as always, moments with you are always glorious. I appreciate you. I appreciate all your insight. I appreciate your commitment to Easton. I just appreciate everything about you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for staying with us.
Thank you all.
Have
Love
a
you so
wonderful
much,
day.
and thank you for letting me do this.